The Mandalorian, it's a bloody fantastic show. No one can disagree with that. But after watching the first episode of the second season, I had a profoundly interesting question. Why? Why is this a bloody fantastic show? What's working with this series? How intriguing is the story? What makes it engaging? And yes, Baby Yoda is a massive contributing factor, but let's not get distracted by it and not acknowledge what else the show is doing. Oh, there it is. It's hiding in a pot. It's so cute. But seriously, let's not ignore what's making this show so good. It's storytelling. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to highlight 3 key moments of phenomenal storytelling and editing from the first episode of The Mandalorian Season 2. Now, the first thing I want to look into is the opening scene. Well, the opening fight, that is. Now, this needs to be a satisfying and epic fight because it's setting the tone for the whole series. And one of the ways they've actually made this fight really epic is actually in some of the editing choices. Now, one of the first things that I noticed is this very clever editing technique that made the pacing kinetic. As the Gamorrean jumps, misses and lands on the bench, the editor chose to crop in for 6 frames. And for the next 6 frames, there's another opponent grabbing Mando and cutting away again. So in half a second, we see 2 completely separate shots. That creates an intense, highly kinetic energy and establishes the fast pace of this fight. The next interesting thing is that they're actually cutting out frames on impact. To make this punch feel more violent, the editing actually removes 2 to 3 frames of the opponent's punch to make the impact more aggressive. It's essentially a jump cut. But when it's played in motion, you don't notice it. Instead, you feel the impact. In fact, they actually use this removing frames on impact at multiple times during this fight. To back end this, the editing also replays specific moments to highlight that beat. As that punch forces Mando's head to fly back and hit the other fighter, we clearly see it happening again in the next shot. Continuity is really important to make sure that your fight scene is, well, coherent. But if you are to actually maintain continuity on motion, the next shot should technically already be past that impact. But that doesn't actually work. It can make the movement feel too fast. When you're introduced to a new shot, you actually need a brief moment for your eyes to take in all of that information. And then once you've then received all of that information and understand what the new shot is, you are then able to, well, fully register that impact and not even realize that you've seen it twice. It's really cool that this fight is happening. It's re-establishing the badassery of the Mandalorian. And there is another aspect of editing that also supports that badassery, and is actually the timing of the cuts. The majority of the cuts last less than a second. In fact, the average time between the cuts is 0.6 seconds. While the opponents are doing their movements, the cuts are incredibly fast. However, when the Mandalorian is counterattacking, the cuts slow down. He is in full control of this fight, and that is emphasized by the fact that his specific movements are highlighted with slower editing. This establishes his authority of the space and, most importantly, his badassery. So that was a fight sequence. The editing and storytelling of that was fucking fantastic. But what else made this episode, well, really good? Moving on, Mando flies to Tatooine and then goes on a 50-second travel montage. Mando then arrives in a village and then encounters the Marshal wearing Boba Fett's armor. And honestly, I'm relieved this character didn't turn out to be another Mandalorian, and so he could take his helmet off, because I am all for any excuse to see the beautiful face of Timothy Oliphant. My word, that is a sexy man. The Marshal and Mando make a deal to take care of the Great Dragon, and they then proceed to then do a travel montage to the next location. Oh god, another travel montage? I got genuinely worried that the pacing of this episode was gonna slow down, because barely 3 to 4 minutes earlier in this episode, we had an entire 50-second travel montage of the Mando coming to the village. And if we've already experienced that emotion, it's boring if we experience it again. However, they fucking knew this, because pretty much unprovoked, the Marshal starts going on a massive exposition dump as to why and how he got Boba Fett's armor. And that's also a problem. An exposition dump. When done poorly, an exposition or a flashback can also slow down the pacing. But the fact that they chose to do the exposition and flashback dump during another travel montage is brilliant. They could have very easily had the exposition monologue in the bar, or while they were casually walking through the village, or honestly any moment where we can get a gorgeous close-up of Timothy. Oh my. It would have worked out fine. But then afterwards, we'd then get the other travel montage and, oh god, again? What can be 2 potentially boring storytelling elements when you combine the 2 can genuinely be engaging. And that is now the second massive storytelling element that I've really appreciated about this show. We have the perfected editing and the fight sequence, and we have the highly effective strategic placement of exposition that maintains a compelling narrative. That was a mouthful. But what about the production? What did they do during filming that made this show really entertaining. No, it's not a technology where they use 20-foot high, 270-degree LED stages that project CG real-time surroundings and lighting that create an incredible in-camera effect and also mean that they can film an entire TV show that explores an endless amount of locations in just one stage. No, but that's worth mentioning. What I'm talking about is how they use the camera to show the sheer scale and size of the Krayt Dragon. The first time we see the Krayt Dragon, we barely get any understanding of how big it truly is because it takes up the entire frame with just a fraction it reveals of itself. The second time we see it, we get a slightly better understanding of its size, but because the camera is significantly further away, it's actually disconnected from the action. It's incredibly unsatisfying. And so what do you do if you want your camera to be close and involved in the action and also represent the sheer scale and size of the Krayt Dragon? The director of this episode, Jon Favreau, asked that question and his solution was brilliant. For the entirety of this episode, the aspect ratio was the standard 2.39:1. However, when the story needed to emphasize and reveal the sheer scale of the Krayt Dragon, aspect ratio very subtly changed to 1.78:1. If you are watching this on a normal widescreen television, you will actively see the aspect ratio fill up your entire TV. This subtle change created an incredible shift in tone and, most importantly, perspective. The climatic fight had an even more cinematic experience because we were able to receive significantly more visual information and fully comprehend the sheer insane size of the Krayt Dragon that we would not have had if the sequence was still presented in an anamorphic aspect ratio. But honestly, the best thing about this IMAX aspect ratio wasn't the beautiful and incredible shots of the Krayt Dragon or the sheer amount of action that could fit inside the frame. It was the beautiful IMAX close-ups of Timothy Olyphant's face. Give me a full feature-length film of IMAX close-ups of Timmy Olyphant's face and I will be the first in line. God damn, that is a beautiful face. Those were the 3 most fascinating moments of storytelling in just that one episode of The Mandalorian. So if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. If this is the first or third time you've seen me and you're not subscribed, well, I think it may be interesting that you do subscribe. All I'm doing on this channel is nerding out about storytelling and editing and just breakdowns and whatever that I enjoy. And so if that's what you like to see, join everyone else who has already subscribed. And to my subscribers who watch me for my YouTube breakdowns, I would love to know about what you think about this experiment where I break down TV and film. Regardless, I hope you had as much fun watching this as I did making it, and I'll see you next time.
Running through the city till I drop. Running through the city till I drop.
I know, Baby Yoda is really cute, I know.